All right. So
my
you
goal.
get Emma Watson.
Yeah, you can have Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Did you want to hang out if he comes?
Well, obviously I'd want to meet him, but my mom's had a crush on him forever, so we'd probably have to.
No, we're not inviting Mom too. This isn't going to be a party. Matthew won't come. It's, the title is I'm Just Steve. It's not just I'm Just Steve and Posse, Hey, it's I Am Steve. I'm Just Steve. That's the idea of the video podcast recording here. And this is episode number 2. Really, it's episode number 1. The first one was really just the intro. And if you didn't watch that, please go back and watch the idea behind I'm Just Steve and why I decided to do this. But of course, episode number 1/2, I had to invite EllenGrace, the wife. If I didn't, I don't know. She might have problems, right? So I got EllenGrace Hauenstein, my beautiful bride, here with me today on the first ever guest appearance on I'm Just Steve, right? So EllenGrace, are you ready to do a podcast?
I think so.
Okay, awesome. So the idea behind the podcast is to remove lenses, right? So the idea is really to talk about being human, right? And why we do things that we do, but removing sort of the amount of labels that someone puts on themselves, right? And so it's so easy in life to go through the process and either own a label or create a label for yourself or have others create the label for you. And I think sometimes we get lost in those labels, right? In that to be mom or working mom or to be spouse or to be divorce, you name the label, it can almost become defying to a point where you can't get out of the label then, right? So EllenGrace, tell me who you are, what you do, so that the audience, obviously I know, but give me a little rundown, however long, to explain sort of the EllenGrace and what she does and who she is and the labels that are placed on you.
So I have a very interesting past.
Yeah.
With a lot more challenges than I'd say your average bear comes across. And because of that, it has created me into quite a unique person, good or bad. Labels, as far as labels go, I'm a mom of 7. So I used to just say I'm a mom, and now I'm like, I am a mom of 7.
Yeah, you do like to claim the 7 a lot.
Well, because I appreciate their reaction, because they're like, what the frick?
Yeah.
And I feel that way every day. So I'm going to bring you into my boat, even if it's 30 seconds.
Is that the idea that you think like, oh, by claiming the 7 children, which you have every right to claim, right? That by giving, like we can't be anywhere without you being like, yeah, I have 7, right? Like,
yeah.
And you like to see their reaction to the 7?
Because it validates my reaction.
That it is crazy? That is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, because people are like, oh my God, how do you do dinner? And it's like, I don't know, I roast 3 whole chickens for a meal.
Right,
or I'll make a prime rib that's 9 pounds for our whole family.
Yeah, people think that's funny that we will like do a whole prime rib, right? But it's cheaper.
It's so much more cost effective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially, you and I have obviously found really good deals at Fresh Thyme.
Yes.
And so we'll be getting our
shout out to the Fresh Thyme.
Yeah, shout out, because they'll sell their prime rib for like $8.99 a pound.
Yeah.
And so it's like so much less expensive than if we were to do steaks for the kids. Oh yeah. And in being a mother of 7, lots of other things have come from that. So obviously with all of our many children, I have started growing all of my own herbs. We did a garden this year with all sorts of fruits and vegetables.
Which, the most liked video, I think, of the year is you protecting the herbs
Oh,
from
oh
the
God,
bee,
don't bring
right?
that up. People are gonna
But
look.
no, yeah, I mean that is the goal. I mean, we can add that in here. We'll give a shout out to your, karate chopping
Oh, yes.
bee
Yes.
experience,
Yes, my
right?
husband, who I asked to help me, sat inside filming and laughing.
Well, there was no point of both going after
Well, then
bees.
I
Like, what
you
was
would have
I?
been stung into
Well,
it.
yeah, I don't need to stomp and everything and act like, yeah, you want the thing, you could go get it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's a huge label for me. My other labels, obviously, I'm a mortgage loan officer.
yeah,
I've been doing it for a long time. I have a very extensive client base, and I've built so many relationships from that as well. So now, when you say labels, are you talking about those types of labels, or are you talking about like what would other people say, or maybe label me
both,
as?
both, right? I think it's both, right? For me, like I talked about in my intro, it is you're dyslexic, right? And what did people say about that when I was younger?
Hmm.
I had chronic fatigue syndrome, according to my mom, right? And what does that
Okay.
label mean? But then, divorced dad, right? Not divorced anymore, but still have that label, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that depending on the world we live in and the place that we are at any given time, is a negative or a positive label, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, why did I? Yes, I am,
Yeah.
but like, why does that need to define the human I am, right? And
Yeah.
so let's talk about the mortgage label, right? A second. And when you say I'm a mortgage loan officer, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to others ultimately? And then we'll talk a little bit more about like how that plays out as a human.
Yeah. So when it comes to being a mortgage loan officer, I am very fortunate in that I have gotten enough business from my amazing realtor base, that I have an assistant, as you well know.
Yeah.
And because of the having an assistant, part of what a traditional loan officer's job involves far more paperwork. Thankfully, that part is off my plate, so I can really focus on sales. So when I think mortgage loan officer now, I just think sales,
Yeah.
and building relationships, genuine relationships. I
Yeah.
see a lot of loan officers struggle, because yeah, they're doing the right steps by meeting and asking for business and sharing the products they have, but they're not genuine people. And I'm sure they are individually genuine, but when
Yeah.
it comes to sales, they're not bringing that genuine nature to their business. And I don't have another mode. All I have is
Yeah. You're on or off.
oh
Yeah.
yes, like I am asleep or I am 100% just Ellen Grace to everyone. I will treat everyone with kindness and respect. Like I'm not,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So we had a little party at the house.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Lord.
Yeah, with 20 some people, right? And you cooked your prime rib. And that was the second year you've done that,
Yes.
ultimately.
Mhm.
And I am always amazed at the relationships that you've created. So salespeople in general aren't necessarily considered relational, I don't think,
I
right?
agree.
Like they are, when you say salesperson, everybody thinks of the car salesman, right? Or the real estate agent, like I am, right? Like, oh, they're out for dollars.
Mhm.
They are,
With any sales
with
job.
any sales job, right? That it's just about income and just about commission. Like the
Yeah.
person is looked at as a commissioned
Yeah.
thing, right? Which
Yeah.
we are commission based, right?
Yeah.
But you're so relational with your agents, almost to a fault, right? At
Oh,
times,
for sure.
right? Yeah,
100%.
yeah. So tell me about like how that transition happened when you became like you weren't a salesperson, you were a mom,
I
a
was a stay-at-home
stay-at-home
mom.
mom.
Yeah.
You got into mortgages,
Yes.
And then how did that switch from stay-at-home mom to salesperson happen? Like that label of salesperson, you claimed that, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even like to claim that they're a salesperson, right?
Yeah, well, because I think it can have a negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
Like, I think back to like a used car salesman that literally sold me a lemon of a car and I was like 19 years old.
Right.
Like, and so when I think of sales, I can still sometimes have that negative connotation when I think about the type of sales that it is.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to not be genuine. I don't know how not to be relational. I I don't know how or why that comes from because like I had mentioned earlier, my past, I've had a lot of people leave me. I have been abandoned and left alone many times in my life to the point to where I have no idea how I am still so excited to meet new people
Yeah.
and make good, close
Yeah.
friends with
I would be
them.
a hobbit, like, or a hermit,
Right?
right? Like, yeah, like, why would you want to like be with people, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
I
What do you see something in each person? Like when you meet with
Yes.
them,
Yeah.
do you see the opportunity of there being like them and where they could go, and so that it's exciting to you to be a part of that journey, or why like I feel like you come home after meeting a new person and like they've become your best friend
Yeah.
immediately, right? And it's not like it's like some people like to have new friends because they're just like projects. Like, oh, I got a new person to hang out. Like, you just generally love as many people
Yeah.
as possible, right? Like
Yeah.
after the party, I was like, I'm done. I'm going to bed. It's 9:30, and you're hanging out till midnight with Emily, drinking more wine and I'm like, I
Yeah.
have no idea, but they're just chatting for the next 4 hours, right?
I think part of it might be a lot of the trauma in my past has made it so I am very good at seeing people's hearts right away. So,
Okay. Yeah.
like, yeah. And if I see your heart and I can tell you're a good person, it really doesn't matter how many mistakes you make
Hmm.
because I understand your heart is coming from a good place. And
Yeah.
so I can forgive that.
Yeah, you've definitely taught me that, right?
Yeah.
Because from my abandonment, right? I'm like, why do I need people half the
Yeah.
time, right? Like, and so there's plenty of that you've been like, hey, they're good
It's a
people.
good person.
It's a good
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
They just make wrong decisions,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And again, I think that goes back to their lens is different than our lens.
Mhm.
You're able to keep your like
Yeah. I always just give them
keep it more
grace.
open,
I can
right?
give them grace. Now, if I'm on the fence, which is pretty rare,
Yeah.
but I'll be on the fence with someone and then I'll just watch the crap out of them. I will
Yeah.
watch how they look at people, how they interact with people. And if sometimes I'm like, oh no, I think they are good-hearted. But if they're not, then I'm like, oh, not gonna go probably build a close relationship with them. Like I'll
Yeah.
always be friendly to people, but I really think it's my trauma. My therapist says it's my superpower because everything I've been through, I'm really good at weeding out.
Reading people
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And kind of weeding out who is good-hearted and
Yeah.
who is potentially malicious in
Right.
nature.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you find the time to do relationships deep enough to keep them? Right. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like your friendships, a lot of them have come out of real estate, right? I don't think you
Yes.
had a big bubble
Yeah. No.
until 5 years ago and
Yeah.
you started this career.
Mhm.
And now your friend group is massive, right? Everybody wants to know where Ellen Grace is wherever I am, right? And so it is your friendships and relationships have grown
Yeah.
exponentially, right?
Yeah.
But you keep making new ones. How do you keep all of them? How do you like process that? Like, okay, you want a depth of people.
Yeah. So I'd say probably a large portion, probably half of my large real estate group of friends, they go to pretty much all the events that's in the Grand Rapids real estate circle, whether it's Women's Council or
Yeah.
GRAR or whatever. So it's easier to keep in touch with those people. But the difference I feel in relationships. So I've had friends that move away, or I don't talk to them for like a year or two just because life is so insanely busy.
Mhm.
But then when we get back together, it's like there was no time apart. And that the secret of that is being genuine and authentic in those times.
Yeah.
So I had a friend moved out. She moved out to Utah. She's one of my absolute best friends, Julianne.
Yeah.
And we'll do a phone call like twice a year. And I used to show up at her house with a bottle of wine without even telling her. I'd
Right.
just be like,
Yeah.
"Hi, Julianne, I'm here now."
Yeah.
um, and even though it's been months, and she came in for our wedding,
Yeah.
but I probably won't see her for at least a year, if not two. And I don't worry about it. I can maintain that relationship because I am secure in that relationship, that I know she loves me and she knows that I love her.
Right.
So, yeah, thankfully for my job, maintaining relationships is pretty easy because that's kind of the whole point of my job, is to maintain those relationships. So, um, yeah.
Going back to mom of 7 kids,
Mhm.
how have you maintained the working mom with the 7 kids mom, right? In
Yes.
that, like, with your original 3,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That are from your body.
Mhm.
They knew how to operate around business mom, right? They learned what that looked like.
Yes.
You can't really train 7 of them to operate the proper way with
No.
business mom, right? Like,
No, well, and your 4, their mother was a stay-at-home mom until just recently, and so that was probably a bigger adjustment for them than it was for me. But yes, since becoming a mom of 7, it's drastically changed how I operate. I used to never be home before 5 o'clock, like
yeah,
never.
yeah,
And now I'm more purposeful about being home in the afternoons and evenings. And obviously we have the nanny there helping with stuff, but if I can work from home and be around our babies, even if I'm just physically there, I feel like growing up when I was a kid, my parents both worked, and we would either walk home from school or take a bus home from school. And we were home alone then until my parents got home. And I didn't like that at all. And so with my 3, it was easier because I didn't have a choice. It was a commission job. And if you're not working, you're not making money. I was a
you're
single mother. I
building.
had to provide all by myself with no help from anybody. And now I have a partner who fully supports me and works. And so it's loosened up my schedule so that I feel like I can work from home in those afternoons
Yeah,
and be more present,
yeah.
you know?
Does that take away from your, like, power spirit sales lady, right? Because I think of, like, the audience, like, how many moms are out there that are trying to balance these 2 worlds,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
In how to flow them into one,
Yeah.
right? In men's book club, we were talking about dad guilt because
Oh, yeah.
because mommy guilt is, like, always talked about,
Yeah,
right?
but
Like,
dad guilt
but
isn't.
dad guilt is not,
Right, because
right?
men weren't
Men,
really obligated to be
they
home.
weren't obligated before,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And then we're all talking about, those dad was with some older guys, and he's like, "Yeah, my dad wound," and I was like, "I've never heard someone call a
Mm.
dad like,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. I could give you my dad like the wounds, right, from dad, but it's just different, right, for men as it is for women, and we can go into that sort of dad guilt thing. But it was very interesting conversation
Yeah.
last night. So I started a men's, like, book club,
Yeah.
like,
In
right,
the barn.
which is totally random. Sidetrack note to the gentlemen that hang out with me, but this was our second time hanging out. And so we did talk about a book, like we did, babe, like for like
Yeah.
an hour, and then
That's fine. I
and
don't
then we
care.
did an hour and a half. Well, no, because Rachel, the other, like, she's like, "You're starting a book club," and I'm like, "Yeah," and she's like, "Are you actually going to talk about books, or are you just going to do like we do, and really it's just an excuse to get away and to like, talk and drink wine. And I'm like, oh, we're actually drinking wine in charcuterie each time. It's kind of great. So it's kind of like a women's book club, or what I picture one to be,
Oh,
but it's like
yeah.
dudes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had great wine. Carlson brought some wine, and we had wine, and it's just kind of funny. But anyways, we were discussing sort of the dad guilt side and this balance of creating businesses, or how much income does a dad need to bring in, those kind of things. And I mom guilt is all over, especially in the profession that you run and that a lot of our circles are, which is real estate professionals.
Yeah.
Your friends are all mostly ladies,
Oh, yeah.
not all, but mostly ladies. How do you send yourself into that world where it's like, I don't think you've ever said to me that you feel guilty about working, or that like
Yeah.
you've never been one that I've thought like, oh man, she's struggling in that. But I know you have lots of friends that do.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel guilty about working, but I do sometimes feel guilty about my attitude. Because I am more masculine in how I run sales. I'm far more aggressive than most females. And it's just my nature. And that can sometimes attract a little bit more aggressive clientele. So especially my higher net worth clients. So if I have failed somehow in meeting those expectations for them, it is so much harder for me to come home and pick myself up and be the good, cheery, happy mom. And that to me is the challenge. I don't feel guilt about working because working has given my children a way better life than they ever could have had if I wasn't working. So that I don't feel guilty about. And I do actually have conversations with the kids. And I'm like, hey, like, I know you wanted to do this, but, mommy works. And I want you to understand that it's not that I'm choosing work over you, but I'm choosing to give you a better life than I had. And yeah, so I guess it's more my attitude sometimes, like turning off that masculine energy that I need in sales. And I need to come home and I need to be that tender mother that will just snuggle her babies. And I, of course, love doing that, but it can be hard. That can be a hard transition.
Yeah. So some of our audience knows about us, right? Well, most would know about me because otherwise I don't know why they'd be here yet. Unless someone was like, this guy's cool or whatever. But I don't think, second episode I've gotten that reach yet. Maybe. You never know. Because I can be funny. But at times. And then, but one thing I was just sort of thinking about was like, how do you balance... we started a consulting company together, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, in one of the, like, what are the three words that we...
Business, sales, and life.
Business, sales, and life, right? So EllenGrace pushed me to get into consulting.
You're welcome.
And so she thinks I'm good at it. And so anyways, we'll see where that goes with our worlds. But I think the life part is your world, right? When we, obviously the podcast speaks to it in my world, but you're consistently asked from mostly females again, how life works for you and how they can build what they perceive your life to be, right? Right or wrong, right?
It's
Whatever
their
perception of EllenGrace's world is pretty put together, which you are 90% of the time put together, but the spouse knows the other 10, right? Which is a train wreck. Yeah, I love it. Thank you. I really appreciate that. But anyways, so like those moms that have the label of I'm a working mom, right? And I don't know where that label originally came from. I guess it's just two words that were put together, right? Instead of just saying mom or this is my career.
I think it's a societal cultivation because most women weren't working. And so it was weird for them to become working. And that's where the term came from.
At the beginning, you think it came from like this person had to claim a label because there just wasn't enough of them going on.
Yeah. And how else would you explain that to people, back when women were 99% at home,
Yeah.
if I'm like, oh, well, I work now, they'd be like, oh, you're a working mother? Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So I think the term has just stayed.
Yeah. So, maybe you'll get into life coaching eventually. I think that's something that you would be really good at. I think you just do it naturally
Thank you.
with your friends right now, right? Because you're never shy on advice, right?
No. Or my own life. Like,
Right. Like you don't have any problem
no,
sharing just about
I'm an
anything, right?
open book.
Right.
Yeah.
So, how would you speak to those moms that are working and trying to figure out that balance, right? I feel like there's almost two different moms that are working that are trying to figure out where their joy is or where they place their energy, right? Because there's the working mom that is a primary provider, and
Right. Like the powerhouse.
I would call that you, right? Yes, I make money, but like you can run your own stuff, right? And you're full time, you're super active, and you're doing your career, and we do children together, right?
Yes.
But there are also that other segment, which is primarily mom, which we have friends, and then now are in either real estate or other careers. And, they might say they're part-time or they're full-time, but, their activities are still kind of almost mandated by their spouses or feel the mommy guilt that they have to be first mom, second. And I don't know why we have to claim one as first and one as second, right? Like it's just, I think that's some of even the title. I'm just Steve. It's like, why do I need to be one thing or the other, right?
Yeah. And again, I think that's a societal label, right? And I mean, if you look at the history of it, men were traditionally the head of the household. And I think people still try to like figure out, oh, who's in charge. Like I've heard so many times, oh, well, she wears the pants in that marriage. Rude, first of all, but
Yeah.
um, I
You do wear
guess.
pants a lot.
Well, yeah, but not the pants. I think, well, and what makes your and my relationship so very different is that we are truly equal partners.
Yes.
Like there is no, oh, it's his decision or it's her decision. Like we truly are 100%. Now, that being said, I have never seen another relationship up close that is like ours
Yeah.
ever. But yeah. What was can you repeat like
I
the
just,
goal of the question?
yeah. So the goal of the question really is to speak to that, just take a minute or two to speak to that mom that has that guilt. Because I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
when
Okay.
you're meeting, you're sometimes the most fired up when you've helped a mom that's working
Yeah.
and that is becoming successful.
Yeah.
Right. And so this, like, you get right into like hire a cleaner and hire a nanny and hire these, and I think a lot of them, some do, right? But a
Mhm.
lot of them still feel guilty about like your advice and how you've sort of built the bubble that allows you to still be Ellen Grace. Right. Like,
Yeah. Okay. I think I understand what you're asking. So you want to like for me to say to other women why they shouldn't feel guilty almost
yeah,
or
like you
the
like your
difference.
label, right? Like
Yeah.
if you were to take your label of being a working mom, right?
Yep.
And a powerhouse mortgage
Yeah.
lender and a
Yeah.
multi-million dollar produce, like
Yeah.
all the things that are put on you. And then you're meeting with um a a friend or someone that isn't a friend yet, but is about to be a friend, because you make everybody your friend. Um,
They're
like
already my friend. They just don't know
they
me.
don't know it yet. Exactly. That's from the invite alone, right?
Yeah.
But you have a way of acknowledging them and then expressing some consulting or something that is it's not
Yeah.
consulting, but it's helping them understand life is um uh, you have a really good way of explaining to females how if they were the men, what would happen compared to them trying to keep the label of I am the
Yeah.
woman.
Well, and I think it's women need to understand that they need to own their life. Like, and in most relationships, I feel like women feel this mom guilt because they're working full time, but simply because they're female, they're the ones cleaning the house and they're the ones cooking the meals and they're the ones watching the kids. So those particular women have two jobs, two full-time jobs. And so I think that's where that guilt comes from. So a lot of young new agents, when they hit success very quickly, they'll call me and be like, "Oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. What are you doing?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, hey, do you have a housekeeper?" And they're like, "God, no." And I'm like, "Why not?" And "Oh, well, I don't want to pay for that." I said, "Okay, cool." So one of my agents, I said, "If I give you $500 right now, will you come clean my house for me?" And she was like, "No." I was like, "Then why the frick are you cleaning your own house?" Like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but why? And it doesn't even cost $500 to get your house clean. But so I think it's helping women recognize that household tasks aren't 100% their responsibility. Like, it's especially single moms, right, too.
Yeah.
Like, there isn't a partner who could potentially help pick up the slack.
Right.
But if you're becoming successful quickly as a female, you need to get that support under you like a man would have with a wife,
Right.
right? Traditional gender roles. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's correct or incorrect. I'm
Yeah,
just
but
saying
traditionally, if I'm succeeding,
that
then you're picking up like if
then
work is succeeding and I'm bringing more money home,
Mhm.
then you're taking a burden off of me at
Yes,
home, right?
right.
But
Yes.
females don't feel that burden being lifted as their success grows.
Yeah, because they don't hire it. They
Do you
just
think that they
don't.
just don't feel like they have the right to?
Yes. I think
Is
that's a
when you're
huge
talking to
portion of
females,
it.
they do not feel like they
I
have the
I
right.
don't I think they
Because that's a fail then? Do they feel like they're failing as a female if they're not doing those roles, right? Like,
Yeah.
are they less than by not doing those roles then mentally?
I don't think so, but I think mentally it's like an innate built-in responsibility that they just feel.
Okay.
I think
So it's just their God-given genes. Like that's how
well,
they're
yeah,
wired.
or how they were raised. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
because we're still talking about, our generations, right? Like, we were still raised
Are
with
we of the
that.
same generation?
Well, I identify as 40, so yes, we are. So, I'm just saying our parents didn't necessarily have the traditional roles, but it was
Yeah.
still very ingrained in their brains and how they function.
Right.
And so I was raised, for example, my brother and my parents would go sit on the couch every night, and I would have to do all of the dishes because I was the girl. And so
Right.
even I was raised of, "Oh, well, you're the girl, so this is your responsibility."
Right.
So, and I didn't have a choice. I had to hire a housekeeper because I simply couldn't work 60 hours a week and keep a house. That's never going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fascinating to hear you when you're talking to people about those worlds and the gender roles and helping females try to decide. And I think for me it's dudes. I mean, when we were talking about it last night, it's interesting where we remember our dads not really being present. Like there was very few of the guys around the table that could say, "Yeah, my dad was at every sporting event,
Right,
was
yeah.
super active."
Yeah.
And then to see all the men that are there, which are just studs, they're really good men.
Yeah.
All like going to all the sporting events
Yeah.
and all the things, right? And really trying to learn how to balance where that middle is, even for men now, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, we saw our dads, so we want to do the opposite. So we're going this way. But then where is that? Like, then we have dad guilt, right? Because it's like, oh, wait, am I supposed to be at every sporting event? Because there are some of those dads that are like the
Yeah.
coaches and
Yep.
stuff. And it's like,
Yep.
yeah, I'm not athletic. I'm not
Yeah.
going to coach anything, but I'll be there for most of them, right?
Yeah.
But if I can't, does that make me less of a dad? Because I thought of my dad as less than because he didn't show up, right?
Yep.
Kind of a thing. So yeah, it's really interesting to see. That was just a really fascinating conversation last
Well, and
night
the
with the dudes.
societal pressures have definitely the pendulum is definitely swinging in that direction, right?
That the men are needing to be more responsible.
Yeah. Yeah, that the men need to participate with their kids. And I mean, I look at society today, people are having 1 or 2 children, if any. I mean,
Yeah.
I have so many friends that are like, "Oh, yeah, screw that. I'm not having any kids." And it's like, "Okay, like, that's your choice, and it's totally fine." But
Yeah.
I think if people didn't have all that guilt or the societal
Uh,
pressures, I think it would actually change potentially for a
yeah.
lot of people
So let's talk about
having
that.
how many
Like
kids.
your growing up was not was full of trauma,
Yeah,
right? Like
lots of
if
trauma.
we're really honest and open,
100% trauma.
you had a lot of situations that were not healthy as a child, right? Why did you decide to have children then? Like, like I think that's where some of those people are like, why? Like, or I'll have one, so hopefully I don't mess it up with the
Yeah,
one because I can put all my energy into the one or the
yeah,
two. And again, there's nothing wrong with 0, 1, or 2, but I think that this idea of like, okay, maybe something happened in life that you're choosing not to participate
yeah.
because of that trauma, right?
So trauma definitely affects it, obviously. I am hyper vigilant.
Yeah,
So growing up, I bad things happened to me by people who are older than me. And I am crazy vigilant about my kids. Like we don't do sleepovers. We don't like I'm
yeah,
not doing
yeah,
any of that. So I think it's not that that would prevent me from having children, but it certainly makes me higher anxiety a little bit and much higher awareness.
yeah,
Um to make sure I protect my kids. But I think for me, for kids and having kids, it my first was a huge oops. He's a birth control baby.
yeah,
um, so that was quite a surprise. So it's not like I chose, but
yeah.
always knew I wanted children because I have so much love inside of me. I don't like, I'm like, I have to put it somewhere.
Right.
There's too much
We're
here.
not putting it into another baby right now, by the way. Let's just put that out there in the podcast. She's got lots of love, but
I do.
my love is getting old. So, this old crotchety man that you decided to marry, even though you identify as
Yeah.
40, like I'm above the 40
Yeah.
mark, right? And so, yeah. So
But
let's just put that
yeah,
on the record
on
for
the
a
record.
minute,
Yeah.
for the
Hmm.
minute. She's still working it hard to see if, she can convince me someday, right?
Well, we'll see,
Yeah,
right? We'll
yeah.
see.
See
I
her
don't
trying to
know. I don't
sell?
know what I want
Yeah,
or don't want in
yeah,
that category, but
yeah,
I truly feel like I don't, there's so many women and I'm so jealous of them because they've hit this point where they're like, "Oh, well, I just gave birth and I just knew I was done." And I was like, "How does that work exactly? Like, did you run out of extra love? Cuz like that'd be cool. I'd
yeah,
like to not like want to snuggle all 7 children all the time. The twins won't snuggle me, by the way.
yeah,
They're a little old for that,
yeah,
but yeah, that for me, that's what kids are. It's somewhere to put this, like all of this affection and love. I need to put it somewhere.
yeah.
If
Because
that
it does
makes
get
sense.
overwhelming with me at times, right? So
Oh
yes,
yeah, I
the
love
kids.
you so much. I'll bite you
Yeah,
sometime.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's R-rated. We
It's
got to be careful.
aggressive.
We don't.
Not that kind of biting. Like I'll bite his arm on the couch or something.
Yeah, yeah, and that's okay. But
Yeah,
but
it's called
you.
love aggression, but
Is
it's
it
totally
okay?
normal.
Yeah, totally normal.
It
Yeah.
is.
Okay. It's good to know that there's a term and that it's psychology allowed 101 kind of a thing. And
Mhm.
you're like learned, like all the things. So of
I do.
course
I do have a psych degree,
yeah,
so
so
that
it's
helps.
gotta be true then, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the trauma label,
Okay.
right? Because I think that as humans, I talk a lot about lenses,
Yeah.
as, taking them on or taking them off. Um, you're so open with people, but also that's hurt you at times,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yes.
Because of the openness
Yeah.
in sharing trauma, right? So,
Yeah.
how does someone go from here's my history and trauma, right?
Mhm.
To I am now going to open up to people
Yeah.
and live life with humans,
Yeah.
which will hurt me, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Some people will. And I have opened up to
yeah,
people who have turned around and stabbed me in the back.
right.
So, yeah, it does happen. I think so at Consumers Credit Union, which is where I work,
Yeah.
one of my bosses asked me in front of all the lenders at our company and was like, Ellen Grace, like, how do you deal with people saying no? Like, why are you never afraid to ask for the referral? It was kind of that
Yeah.
line of thinking. I just said, well, like, my parents abandoned me when I was 16 years old. Like, I've been rejected way worse than anything that could ever happen again. So I don't, how, if I walk up to you and you say no, oh no,
Right.
like,
Right.
I have no
Which I
fear.
said no to you for like months. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirsten.
Yeah.
Shout out
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
putting me on his calendar for coffee so I could finally get some loans from
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So yeah, so I think again, as you're doing your sort of life coaching
Yeah.
with the females that you hang out with,
hmm
how do you help them balance that trauma to create openness? Right? Because
So,
most
yeah.
don't,
Well,
right? Like
because
it's
they don't
very
feel safe.
hard,
They don't
right?
feel safe
Okay, so then how did
to
you
do that.
get like but your trauma would say that you shouldn't feel safe because
I
people abandon
shouldn't.
you,
It's true.
right? So then
So,
how did you overcome that to be like, okay, like I can go and just be rejected all the time? Because that's not
so
a normal thing, right? If
no,
I'm abandoned and
yeah,
people hurt me,
yeah. Then you can become jaded.
then well, it's not just jaded. It's just it's not a jaded. Like for me, it's not jaded. It's just like, why would I want to allow hurt? So I might as well not participate in it, right? Like,
Yeah,
so it's not a jaded. I don't dislike people. It's just oh, my natural reaction is like doing the men's book study, right?
yeah,
Like that is like the coolest thing for me, right? And I'm talking a lot about it because we did it last night, right? And that was the second time, and we did charcuterie and all the things. And I came back in the house and was like super happy, right?
yeah,
Because I do love interacting with people,
yeah,
but there is still that little what do they call that little part of your brain that's the fight or flight part
yeah. hmm
where you're still like, ooh, I was really open with those dudes,
Yeah,
right? And what if one of them just like goes off the rails and doesn't like,
yeah. And they might.
and they might, and
Yeah.
well, my history tells me they will,
Right.
right? My history says, okay, this is super cool,
Yeah.
but like it will flop. And a guy will hurt another guy, and
Yeah.
relationships will be broken,
Yeah.
and hurts will come,
Yeah.
and then I'll be Steve, the bad guy again,
Yeah.
for some reason that I'm not even aware of.
Yeah.
Even though I started this cool thing and everybody wanted to participate in it, like eventually I will always be the bad guy, right?
That's your trauma speaking,
Yeah,
right?
that's the trauma and the brain speaking, right? You've taught me just to do it,
Yeah. Do it anyways.
and do it
Do it
anyways, and see
anyways.
what happens.
Well, there's no point living your life in a bubble. Like, you need to still live life. And yeah, and understand, yes, I am going to get hurt. Are there car accidents? Yeah. Am I still going to drive? Because I need to drive.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, so I'm not.
Well, and you just drive fast, so you can avoid them most of the time.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll just.
Is that how you deal with your trauma too? Just go fast enough that you bypass it with
That's
people?
probably my ADHD.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah,
And my very fast car.
yeah,
No, I think so. I think initially you kind of asked about like how I started opening up and
yeah,
stuff. So I think a lot of it was actually after my divorce. My ex-husband, that whole relationship was the most traumatic. I almost didn't survive it.
yeah,
Things.
yeah. Suicidal,
But
right?
yeah, I was suicidal for
110 pounds or something like that, right?
108 pounds at
Yeah,
5'6".
yeah,
Like I couldn't eat. I wanted to die. I would beg God to kill me.
yeah.
Which is pretty heavy. Let's lighten this back up.
No, it's okay.
But
That's the human you are, right?
that
Is
is
the
who I
lens
am.
that you come out of.
That is who I am.
And that is the trauma that
Yeah.
you
Yep.
live with,
Yeah.
right?
So I think when I first got divorced, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Like what had happened to me. Like I had been raped. I had been abused
Yeah.
so severely for years from the same man. When I got out of it, people are like, "Oh, you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm okay." But like, and he would like call or text or something, and I'd be super triggered. And so
Yeah.
then I would open up in that moment. I think that happened from triggers.
Okay.
And I couldn't because I'm so genuine and
Yeah.
authentic. I can't hide it. So if I'm triggered everyone in the room's going to know about it. It's
Right.
not that I'm going to tell them, but I'm going to be like,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So then in those
Triggered
moments.
with, can you, so you know the verbiage now for
Okay,
yourself,
yeah.
right? I think that
Yeah.
sometimes you've been in counseling for since that, and you know, you
A
were in
long
it
time.
before, and now
Yeah.
you're doing it well again.
Yeah.
And we actually do couples counseling
We do?
together, right? Because we're triggered by each other at times.
Yeah.
But we know words, right? So this
Yeah.
trigger and trauma.
Yeah.
Can you help the audience
So what
understand
a
what you
trigger is,
mean by
so
that?
I have PTSD. I was diagnosed with PTSD, a lovely parting gift from my
Yeah.
ex-husband. And in that, so if something happens,
PTSD is what?
post-traumatic stress
Okay,
disorder.
thank you.
So if something happens, like you have triggered me on accident, right?
Right.
Like you, I don't know, stayed out 2 hours later than you said. And then I will have almost like sometimes I have full-on panic attacks
Right.
as part of my PTSD. I can't function. I can't think. I'll shake,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And then, so that's kind of what I mean by triggered.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
because in my past, and the PTSD is coming from is my ex-husband just
So
wouldn't come home at night.
an episode will occur that will remind you of the experiences in your trauma.
Yes.
And then because of that,
It puts me right back there.
You'll feel like you're back.
Yes.
You know that you're not, but ultimately
I know
you're
here,
right.
but here I don't.
Yeah, in your soul, you
Yes.
feel like I'm going to get hurt again.
Oh
Like
yeah,
this
like
is happening
danger.
again. Danger.
Yeah, and I think my PTSD is so severe because my brain equates that trauma with death because
Right.
that's what I wanted when I was there.
Right.
And so my PTSD
I'm going to
reactions
get
are
back to that.
yes.
Right. Which, you know, PTSD is more widely known with our veterans, right?
Mhm.
Like that seems to be where people acknowledge or understand PTSD.
Yep.
Where
They'll hear fireworks and it brings them right back to the war.
Back to where they
And-
were in the war,
yeah.
or a car accident will happen,
Yes.
or someone will knock on the door. Like
Yeah.
in that triggered moment, they will think that they're back in the fight in the war, right?
Yeah, and you can't regulate.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Like-
you don't realize that you're not there, right?
Yeah.
And you've learned to work yourself out of it pretty quickly now.
Yeah, this will take some time. Like,
But you
yeah.
will. So, how do you think more people live with that than they realize? Like when you're meeting with people and talking to people, do you think
Yeah.
that there's more
I think there's people who lack awareness of that.
of
you
that?
know?
That's their world that they live in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And their trauma and what it means because
Yeah.
they're not in counseling, or just because no one's told them that those are the words that they can use.
I think people don't understand what happened did traumatize them.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people know that something traumatized them. I mean, if you think about marriage is a great example, right? Because when you are in a marriage, all the trauma is going to be out. So
Yeah.
you can trigger your partner on accident. They can trigger you on accident. But maybe something happened when you were a kid. Like, let's say, we'll go back to my example. If I'm the kid who washes dishes all the time while my family sits and watches TV on the couch, that didn't traumatize me, but it could very easily have traumatized someone else. And then that person growing up, they're like, I don't do the dishes. I don't do the dishes. And then the spouse is like, why don't you ever help with the dishes? And they're like, I don't know. I just hate the dishes.
Yeah.
So I think people just lack awareness sometimes.
Yeah. That actually was something that was ingrained in them as a trauma, and then the response to that trauma is
Avoidance.
Avoidance.
Yeah, avoidance. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that because I was forced to do that. But they don't think because I was forced to. Sometimes they'll just think like, oh, I just hate the dishes. I don't know why I hate them.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I think people sometimes aren't aware.
Yeah.
And because think of it, if nobody had trauma, we would never fight because the way that our lenses would work would always be seeing the good heart in someone
Right.
and knowing those reactions aren't
Yeah.
a cause of you. So I always say your behavior is a reflection of you and only you. So if someone comes up to me, and I've used this with the kids, and punches me in the face, I'm going to want to punch them back, but I'm responsible for my behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to punch him back because I wouldn't punch someone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think ownership of yourself and getting to know yourself
Yeah.
and building that confidence and being like, no, I know who I am and
Yeah.
I know how I would react in situations,
So when we were dating, at the beginning, you weren't in counseling. And then I was like,
Yeah.
either go to counseling or we're not dating anymore. Kind of a ultimatum, right?
Yep.
In a nicer way than just that. But basically, you knew what I was saying.
Well,
So
I
you
was triggered every 5 seconds, so.
you were a little. Yeah. So, but you were reluctant at first because you were afraid of getting back into the garbage, right? Into the trauma,
Yeah,
right?
it can be intimidating.
Right. So yeah, because I am very pro counseling.
Yeah, as
right?
am I.
And so it's something I do every 2 weeks, even if I'm good. It's amazing, like actually when it's like a
same.
really good week, how much I actually work on myself.
Yeah.
Instead of just dealing with the situations at
Yeah,
hand on the weeks where I'm like not as good as I should be. So how but there is a movement, especially with men. I don't know about females, but with men, like I've seen podcasts and I've seen like clips where the dudes are like the dude, and they're like, if you're a man, you shouldn't need counseling because
No.
you should be working. You like if you're like doing the activities of life, you shouldn't have enough brain power to need to worry about your trauma as a kid, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is like so.
It's just ignorant.
That's a great word.
It's just ignorant.
Yeah.
I think people, and, I know my parents' generation, like,
Yeah.
you try to ask someone in their generation to go to therapy, they're going
Right.
to be like, I don't need therapy. Somebody else needs therapy.
Right.
They
It's
don't.
always someone else's
It's
issue.
always someone else's problem instead of owning that they might actually need some help.
Yeah.
And therapy is wonderful. I recommend it to everyone. And that was actually a condition for both of us of our engagement was getting into marriage counseling right when we got engaged. And we both wanted
And
that.
it wasn't pre-marriage. I mean, it was pre-marriage because we weren't married yet. But I had this conversation with another couple at an event the other day, and they're getting married, right?
Yeah.
And they're all excited, and they moved in together, and it's great. And I don't know how it came up, but I just asked something, and then I just said, "Are you guys doing counseling together?" And they're like, "No, like we've talked about doing some pre-marriage counseling." And I'm like, "No. Like you're blending two families. You're getting remarried. They both are divorced."
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, you guys,
You need it.
You need it
You
because
need it.
you don't even realize the things that you are coming with that are going to set you guys off and mess with your kids because you don't know like how to communicate properly.
Yeah. I think as a nation, we're kind of programmed similar with doctors, right? You don't go to the doctor unless something's wrong.
Right.
That's not okay.
Right. So they seem happy and everything seems amazing.
Yeah. Oh, I can keep it together. Like I'm just gonna drink this bottle of wine every night.
Yeah.
I can hold myself together. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I remember when you told me a bottle of wine was your medication.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for a while it was.
Yeah.
For a while each night I'd have a bottle of wine. Like the kids are in bed, I need to unwind. I have a lot of, back then I used to have like 5-6 triggers a day. Right. So I was physically and mentally exhausted. And that was the only way to take the edge off of all of the anxiety and trauma I was feeling inside.
Right.
Was to numb it.
Right.
But thankfully, with years of therapy.
Yeah. And me being so amazing,
and
of course.
You,
I mean, let's give me a little credit,
well, it's true. It's completely true. Well, you're so patient. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important too, is always being so patient with people who at least are aware of their trauma. Because it's like, at least they're working on it and they're trying. So,
but I think we have learned and are still learning how to communicate now as newly married and owning the like divorce side of the equation, right? And saying, okay, these things happened in my last marriage and I don't want them to happen here because these are items that I could see spiral out of control and be issues, right? So when I made the spreadsheet of our nightly bedtime as an example, and I use that with this couple, and I'm just like, hey, like, we didn't go through this with our counselor, but because I'm in counseling, I felt we're in couple counseling. I felt comfortable writing out this whole. We were arguing about bedtimes, right?
We were. He wants to go to bed at like 9, and I'm like 10.
Right.
Usually.
Yeah, and I'm like in bed at 9.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like tucked in
in
with
it,
his
right?
breathing mask on, all of it.
Oh yeah. Now that Darth Vader is in the room is so
Yeah,
great.
right.
Yeah, guys, if you snore, you need to get a Vader mask. Like it's changed my life. I love sleeping now with the Vader mask. It's the CPAP machine, but I call it the Vader mask. Yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think that I wrote out that list of us arguing, right? And it was like you laughed at me, but it was both.
A
It was
playful laugh.
no, but it
It
was
was
like
fun.
I think it was a relieving laugh,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it was like, wait, for the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, each night we feel tension,
Yeah.
right?
Because you're like, well, I want to go to bed. And I'm like, well, I don't. And then you would feel sad if I'm like, well, I need like another hour to stay
Right.
up. And you're like, well, I guess.
Well, I was exhausted because I'm playing tennis in the morning. I'm not sleeping in till 9 a.m. I'm getting up at 5:30, right? So that was also change of lifestyle.
Yeah.
But it allowed for the spreadsheet allowed for communication, right?
Well, yeah.
And that it was like, wait a minute,
And
like
accountability. Yeah.
right? And so I think that counseling allowed us to be open enough to do that now, right?
Yeah, I feel like
Where we
counseling
didn't do
allows
it
you
before.
to talk about a whole plethora of things that you don't typically talk about with your spouse, especially when you have kids, because
Right.
it's like, oh, what are you doing today? What are you doing today? Who's got this kid? Who's got that kid?
Yeah.
Instead of setting aside that hour that we go every other week, and we're
Right.
like, he's like, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm a little salty because we've been going to bed at like 8:30, and I'm gonna die if I have to keep going to bed at 8:30.
We were not going to bed at 8:30. That may have happened like once.
Like
And
at least once a week. But
yeah, the problem is you gave me the 9 o'clock permission, and then I took it for like all that it was worth. Right?
Yeah, you did.
So one night we were watching TV. So I've never been a TV person until you, right? But Ellen Grace likes to wind down with TV, and so at some point I get bored, and then I get tired, right?
Yeah.
So she said a comment of like, "It's not 9 o'clock yet," right? And I was like,
Oh, yeah, and you took it way too
yeah,
far.
I was like,
"There's
9
something
o'clock
on
is the
9
permission.
on the calendar is what I said.
Yeah, and I was like, oh,
or on the
9 is
clock.
the permission. So then at 9:03.
Oh, yeah, and then every night he's like, oh, look, it's 9 o'clock. It's 9. I'm like, no.
The episodes
look
were always
here."
done, but it was like
Doesn't
9:07 or 9:04, right? So anyways, yeah. So we worked through that.
Yeah.
If anybody wants that spreadsheet, they're welcome
You
to
got to
have
erase
it.
the one
Yeah.
sentence on
Well,
there.
no, it's part of it, right?
I
Like
get it, but you don't need to be advertising that.
what? Day sex is not
Yes,
okay?
Dave.
Like we're married, right?
I know, but just don't post it.
Oh, I did, and I had to take it down.
I know.
Someone made me take it down. Rachel did. The politically
Thank you,
correct.
Rachel found I owe you a drink.
Yeah, but it was how to accomplish this better for us, right? And I think a lot of times in relationships it is negotiation of being like, hey, like,
Yeah.
how do we win together, right?
Yeah.
And not one feel like they're losing.
Yes, and
Right?
that I feel is truly where the marriage counselor comes in, because he's gonna have both sides, and then he can kind of help be like, hey, like,
Or her.
or
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Ours is a he. Sorry, the marriage counselor.
Yeah.
Can kind of help you reach that common ground in
Yeah.
a really great, healthy way. Like, it.
Yeah. So I think to the audience, like, don't hesitate to start that earlier than when you feel like you're falling apart. I think a lot of
You
people
need
wait
to.
till like,
I've
we're
actually-
almost to divorce.
Yeah.
And then we're going to try to like
Yeah, no.
unwrap 5 years of garbage, right? Like, how do we do that?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the resentment's already there then. So
Yeah.
I think I have advised many of my couple friends. I'm like, you go to the doctor for an annual checkup. Why aren't you going to the therapist for an annual checkup? Like,
Right.
and you need one for your marriage and you need one individually. And even if you just go that once a year and say, hey, these are the things I'm struggling with, then you can say, okay, maybe we do need another session, or no, I think we're really good. We're in a really good place. And then check in again the next year, because it's when you let all that garbage build up that it's going to snowball. It's
Yeah.
going to roll down the hill and just keep
And it's
gaining
hard to
momentum.
break that ball back up,
Good
right?
luck.
Yeah.
Most people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we probably need to wrap up because it's
Okay.
been like an hour. What do we got for time? An hour. We've been
Okay.
talking for an
Look
hour.
at that.
Look at that. You can talk. I told you you'd be fine, right? But like as we sort of finish up, I'm just Steve, right? Like what do you feel like you didn't say that you'd like to say? Is there anything that you
I
would
guess
like
I'd just
to?
like to say that if anyone ever wants to come talk to me or us about personal stuff, like, or ask me, like, I have been through hell in my life many
Yeah.
times. So if anyone ever wants to do that, I am an open book and I am here. Like, I
Yeah.
would love the opportunity to just kind of help people. So that'd be all I have to add.
Yeah. Yeah. But I hope that you as the audience see the genuine nature of the woman that is my wife,
Well, they're
right?
all going to be my friends. They just don't know it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, if we get like thousands of
I'm going to
subscribers
have so many
someday.
friends.
Yeah. Well, and also shout out Matthew McConaughey is going to be on here eventually
Oh,
because
okay.
Elliot told me that's the goal
Well,
this
if
morning.
you get Matthew McConaughey, I get Emma Watson.
Oh, okay. Like,
Or no, yeah, she
well,
was
this
Hermione
isn't your
Granger, right?
podcast, though.
Well, okay, but
This is my podcast. But if you want to put that out as a goal, that I get this Emma Watson to come on and then you can co-host with me, that's fine.
Yeah.
We can put that out as a
okay,
goal.
all right, that's
So shout out
put it on my
to
vision board.
Emma Watson. Does Emma Watson do podcasts? Have you ever seen a podcast?
I
with
don't
Emma
know,
Watson?
but she just seems like one of the few genuine celebrities out there.
Yeah,
doesn't
which
she?
is Matthew for me,
And
right?
she's
Yeah.
so smart.
Is she?
Oh my gosh, she's like, I think she went to like Cambridge, and she like,
Okay.
yeah,
Emma Watson. What is Emma, for people that don't know, what is Emma
Hermione
Watson?
Granger from
She's Hermione.
Hunger Games.
Oh, okay.
Or Hunger Games.
No, from
Potter.
Harry Potter.
From Harry Potter.
Both start with an H, so
Both
I get
too.
that.
That's my dyslexia right there,
Yeah, that came out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but from Harry Potter, she just
Harry Potter lady.
I feel like
girl.
we watched her kind of grow up on the movie
You
series.
did.
I
Yes.
did.
I'm not a.
And
Harry
now that she's
Potter.
an adult, I'm always so impressed. I'm like, oh my gosh, she seems like someone that's genuine. I want to connect with her because
Yeah.
I'm like, I
So
think
that's your celebrity hero.
that'd be like if somebody's like, who would you want to meet? I'd be like, I want to meet her because I
Yeah.
want to like get to know her because
Yeah. What would you ask her? What would be your first question you'd ask Emma Watson? That's not like a nerdy Harry Potter, so you don't go into that world.
I would honestly just ask her about her life.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to read it in an article because that's not genuine to me. I want to talk to her. I want to read her body language and her facial expressions and just like kind of soak it all in personally.
Okay.
So.
All right. So you
Cool.
get Emma Watson.
Yeah. You can have Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to hang out if he comes?
Well, obviously I'd want to meet him, but my mom's had a crush on him forever, so we'd probably have to.
No, we're not inviting mom too. This isn't going to be a party. Matthew won't come. It's, the title is I'm Just Steve. It's not just I'm Just Steve and Posse, Matthew's got to come and eat steak with me and that kind of thing. And
I could hang out with him.
Yeah.
He seems like a cool, solid dude.
He seems like a cool dude, right? Yeah. So Elliot told me the goal of the
podcast.
The podcast should be if I reach ultimate success that I get Matthew on here. So
well, we'll call his agent.
Yeah. If anybody knows Matthew's agent, right? His booking person, I'll ask him cool questions and we'll chill. I'm not going to smoke weed with him or anything, but we could probably do a shot or do a tequila if we need to promote that or something.
Funny.
Yeah. So anyways, this is podcast number 1/2 because we had the intro, and this is my dear wife, EllenGrace Hauenstein, and wrapping up, I'm Just Steve. Thanks guys for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, babe.